and welcome to another episode of our crossover event of Lizzie Watches Yaoi with Beneath Your Skin. Because what's better than two horror aficionados that love reviewing movies about demonic possession, exorcisms, and Vatican's hidden mysteries, with a Yaoi podcast about beautiful boys who love each other and, have beautiful homoerotic adventures. Well, of course, you get the wonderful show Vatican Miracle Examiners about two hot priests that love each other and go and solve mysteries about demonic possession. Yay! How are you today, Gaia?
I'm fine. I'm fine. A bit tired, but I'm fine. And then I watched our beautiful boys doing their things and being cute together. And we see one of my favorite characters too. So yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah, the world makes a bit more sense after you've watched an episode of this. It's like, could be feeling down, but not with all this gorgeousness around. So our lovely episode 11 starts off with a little recap of the part of the story that I kept forgetting, which was the fact that it's like Venus and the moon will align, and only then will you know the true number of the beasts. And I was like, thanks for that lovely piece of advice, Solomon. I still don't get it until later in this episode when I'm like, haha, I now get it. That's much better. And I'm glad it kind of like, they've reaffirmed what was going on. And we get our beautiful opening. Gorgeous opening. I love it. And the name of our episode, Gold of Darkness, I Am the Lord.
And for once, it's a quote from the Bible, more or less. It's not literal, but it's from the prophet Isaiah.
Aha, because I was going to do my usual ask. It's like, is this something that's related to something? Do we need to know anything about the prophet Isaiah?
The prophet Isaiah is one of the many prophets in the Bible. He wrote some letters and he has his own section inside the Bible. Basically, he is the one who told us about the greatness of our Lord. And also, he was one of the first prophets prophetizing the come of Jesus Christ.
It's a kind of an important figure. He's one of the first that kind of knew, like, what was going to happen.
Yes, he was important. And he is one of those prophets that always tell us that real richness and wealth is to be found in our Lord. For once, the title, it makes sense to me.
Yes. Well, I was saying, it sounds like his teachings are definitely the complete opposite of what the Goldini is going for. Like, the complete opposite of, like, where value and worth is, with the amount of just bad decisions about where to get your wealth from. They're clearly, like, in charge of and making, and just, they're not good people. And they are definitely materialistic as anything.
They believe in God, they claim God is leading their ways, but I have my doubts about God appreciating what they are doing, above all the part in which you basically enslave the generations of people and force them to live in a cave.
Yes, I feel like that's definitely not what God would want from, like, his chosen peoples.
Yeah, I think they got it wrong somehow. God's message. I think they read the wrong book, because honestly I don't think they read the Bible or the Gospels or anything religious at all. They probably read a lot of books about how to make money in the worst possible ways.
Yep.
And how to trade cocaine.
Yeah.
But who am I to judge?
Well, I'm hoping that neither of us are trading cocaine and enslaving people underneath our houses. I was going to say, my husband could slightly say that he's slightly enslaved in his own house, but he chose that. He's okay. He enjoys serving me and bringing me my things. On that tangent. So, our episode starts off where we left off, and everybody's going down to the woods. So we have Detective Bougie, we have FBI Bill and Roberto and Joseph, and they're all going down to the woods to try and solve the mystery, find out some of these locations, and try and, basically get to the bottom of this weird story that's been spanning 32 years. And when they get there, one of the locations they find is the old location where the decapitation and the filming was taking place. And they explain that, like, they're not really going to find a campfire or any evidence around the place, but nobody comes here. And it's covered in thick fog, and no one has disturbed it. So some tin cans have been left on the floor, and yeah, they've been preserved for 30 years because no one's touched anything or been there, so they've just sat there. And tin doesn't exactly decay at the same rate, because they're not made with. I don't know what they're made of nowadays, but they're made of stuff that doesn't really like rust anymore because you can't have rusting beer cans.
Yeah, but 32 years ago,
Yeah,
cans could rust. And honestly, they do. If you keep them outside long enough, they
yeah,
rust.
yeah.
And okay, I know that in Tuscany, especially in Florence, we don't have a good names about investigations because honestly, you can start to talk about crimes committed since the 40s until nowadays, and we almost got no murders. Literally, the
Hmm.
two most recent ones, we only got the culprits because one was still on the crime scene.
Yeah, after
Yes,
getting caught.
he literally was still there, close to the corpse because he was his lover, and he killed him in a moment of rage because he was jealous of him. So he stayed there close to the corpse, and that's why the our police wondered, is this man the guilty one? We are not sure, but we are going to keep him. Another one, she basically left her fingerprints everywhere. And we like to joke. It's not something we should do because it was an horrific murder, but we like to joke that basically she left name, address, and her phone number for the police to find. So that was very easy. And another one, the so-called monster of Ubbiano, not the monster of Florence. Monster of Ubbiano, he was a man who went around torturing and killing prostitutes. Um, he was found because one of the carabinieri, he remembered the van, the small van, related to another case, and he was like, "Wait a moment, I know that van. I know the man driving that van," and that's what how they solved this case because it was related to something else.
Okay.
But since the 40s, since the day one nun who was working as a nurse at one of the hospitals in Florence, you could kill people in Florence and basically disappear from existence because no one found out who murdered a lot of people in Florence. So yeah, okay, I understand we don't have a good name while we talk about investigations, but really 32 years and no one touched anything? Okay, that's a
Yeah.
little bit too much even for us.
Yeah, we're just gonna have to go. It's like it's such a remote place, and everyone's been chased off by, what's going on around there, and there's just like the bigger picture. Those kind of things that you just kind of gloss over. But they find this mysterious pile of cans. They're like, oh look, it's Carlos's like beer cans, and they notice there's a tiny hole in one of them. So they surmise that obviously this can must have had a hole drilled in it, and it was drugged. And most likely, the person who drank this can of beer would have been Dominica because her reaction was so severe, it was like she was basically tripping. And they kind of put these pieces of the puzzles together and be like, okay, so Dominica was drugged that night. They continue their lovely little journey through the woods to try and find the house of nowhere. Or what's it called? It's the house over there. The house over there. Which is, in fact, the well, which could be our potential entrance way to another underground, like, secret passageway. Because there's always an underground secret passageway. And they notice that the well has a magic circle drawn around it. And they're like, wow, if this was here 30 years ago, someone would have noticed. And of course, Joseph, the clever boy he is, he's like, no, this is fresh. This has only been here for a couple of days. And they're like, okay, this must have been done by the only person he can think of is Father Tronas when he ran away from the demon. And he assumes the demon has come out of this hole, tried to protect it by putting the magic circle around it and sealing it. Well, they go, you know what we should do? We should enter this well. Not going to tell anybody. Not going to call for backup. You know, it's not like there's been murders or anything and there's a mysterious hole in the woods with some occult scripture around it. They're just going to go down the well. So they go down the well, and I have to say that Boofy, through this entire episode, you just want to slap him because he pretty much overreacts to everything, and he's a little wuss. Poor delicate. It's like, why are you a freaking detective? I suppose you have no problem really looking at dead bodies, but then when it was the autopsy, he was like throwing up. So it's like, well, he can't handle that, and you're just like, I'm scared.
But he's a policeman in Tuscany. You don't understand what that means. It means that he was supposed not to know what to do. Come on. Okay. I already told you.
Okay, so it was a realistic portrayal of what a Tuscan police officer would be like. I feel bad if any Tuscan police officers are listening to this episode. We're just going
on. If I get arrested, you know why?
Yeah, for insulting the Tuscan police. But yeah, Boofy is just like, oh, it's dark. Oh, it's scary. Oh, I don't like it. Oh, I'm going to die. Oh, I want my mummy. And you're just like, oh, you're kind of adorable in your patheticness, little man.
But the only good thing happening to him is that FBI Bill burns his tie. It was horrific.
Oh, so ugly. I'm like, you're quite a well-dressed guy with your cool, quirky haircut, and then you're wearing that blue abomination on you. It's like, no, it does not go with the rest of anything.
Exactly. So that was a good thing. And he was so heartbroken when his tie was burned.
No!
No, my tie. It was ugly.
It was ugly.
Why are you sad? I mean, even if it was a present from your mom, it was ugly.
Very ugly.
So be happy it's gone.
So as they're entering, Roberto kind of tells Joseph a little bit more about like what's going on. And Joseph has said that it's like the three of you look like you kind of came to an understanding. You've put something together, but I don't understand. And Roberto's like, it's probably kind of not in your expertise. Because Joseph generally like deals very much in logic and facts, and you can tell that he's not as socially comfortable and not as socially aware of human behaviors and stuff. And Roberto is like, if you think about it this way, it's like there were 4 people, 2 couples. We had Teresa and Carlos, and we knew Carlos was being abusive towards Teresa. We had Antonio and Dominica was already having some mental health issues anyway. So the 2 friends of Antonio and Teresa started discussing like their relationship woes and probably started like having feelings for each other. And it was because of these feelings for each other that they realised they needed to kind of get the other ones out of the picture so they could like build on this relationship and start an affair. And therefore it's most likely that they were the ones that staged the whole decapitating clown incident, because Carlos passed a beer to Antonio and Antonio was the one that gave the beer to Dominica. So, and like Joseph is like, well, that's all kind of just like hearsay and stuff. It's like, but if you understand kind of like how human emotions run, it's quite a likely scenario. So they go down into the well and they're like, ooh, it's an underground secret passageway. 'Cause of course it is. And it opens up into this weird cave system of lots of tiny holy caves, and it's dark and creepy, but there's bioluminescent algae. So for some light, well done them. And they see something moving around. And Roberto's like, it looks like an ancient settlement. And they're like, this is really weird. And obviously to get here, like there was that song about the creepiness of going on, and you pass a shaky pot and there's a big symbol and they see the Bobona crest. And we're like, aha! Well, we now know this has definitely got something to do with the Bobonas and their wish for gold. But how bad is it going to get? And they're like, it's gonna keep getting worse. And obviously they pass the shaky pot, and they're like, okay, we're going a little bit further. But they're like, wait a minute, how do we get through this? And then they remember Solomon's wonderful advice about, being brave and jumping ahead, and somehow this means that they have to light the pot, which is why, like, you know, Bougi's like tie gets sacrificed. But it's for the good of everything. Like, they throw it into the pot of oil, it catches fire, and the doors open. And then Joseph in Science Brain goes, this is like the palaces of Alexandria, where there was water, oil, and steam, but because of it being underground, if you don't move fast enough, then you get suffocated by, like, carbon dioxide from being in an underground room that's got a giant pot of fire in it. And it's like, okay, yeah. So they pass the first one, and they start walking down, and then they notice the road forks. And Roberto is like, this is just like Solomon's story. We have, you know, passed the bravery test and forging forwards. Then it says, ignore the other path. Let's just keep going straight. And they're like, cool, this is great. We will keep going straight. Which obviously leads to creepy cave system. It's like, it wasn't
But
straight.
it's a fork.
Yeah.
But it's a fork. You don't know which one is the new way and which one is the old way. I was expecting something like this way is more used, or that way doesn't smell right, or something to indicate which one is the old way and which one is supposed to be the new way. They didn't know. They just... I mean, they couldn't even go straight because literally there was a fork. So if they kept going straight, they would have smashed against the corner of the wall. So I was like, okay, and how are you going to understand which one is...
I'm going to go like, Roberto probably worked it out, but they just forgot to tell us that, like, you know, how they got to that conclusion. Since Roberto pretty much solves everything during the course of this. Like, so what will you do without Roberto? I do not know, people. But yeah, so they solve the really obscure mystery of which fork in the road they go through Roberto's magical brain power. And yeah, we find that this ancient settlement is filled with dehydrated, like, depigmented boys. And it assumes that there's also women in there. We're only introduced to one of them. And he's like, yeah, he's been down there for 27 years, just like his father and his grandfather. And generations of people just living underground. And you're like, where the hell have you been living underground? It's, we're in service of, obviously, the Caledonia and the Bobona. And we are here to dig the gold from their mines. And it's like, they just seriously enslave a whole load of people just to dig gold out for all eternity. Yes, they did.
Without telling them that the Bourbones family basically now only has one throne left in Europe, and is the throne of Spain, because everyone else, they were gone.
Yeah.
And no one told them, and they are still there digging gold and basically living like little small creature that the world forgot about.
And they're just like...
No, not forgot about. The world doesn't even know they are there.
Like, they're trapped down there because they can't escape from this place, like, cause unless they, like... And there's no gold for them to dig anymore, and they're living off insects, and they just don't know how. And Roberto's like, don't worry, we're going to get you help. And it's like, you can be free. And the guy's like, oh, thank you. I thought you should be a little bit more grateful that you're getting released from these caves. But maybe you're so downtrodden that you just can't emote anymore because you've been living in a cave for generations, digging out non-existent gold to fill a gold room that you're not allowed in. Because, well, yeah, the Bobonas are crazy, and they now have this new faction called the Goldini. And it's like, oh, goodness, these poor people. But they're saying that, like, after all the, like, gold for the mines, like, drew up, they tried to, try and find another source, but they came across people printing indulgences. And they're like, what is printing indulgences? And it turns out that they came across people counterfeiting money, and were like, what is going on? And this guy's friend stole one of the money and escaped. And obviously this was the poor boy that was killed. So he obviously came across the counterfeiters, stole one of the counterfeit, notes, escaped, and got very murdered. And he explains that, yes, the counterfeiting is happening over there. I can't go that way. It's just I'm not allowed. I think fear of death. They're very scared and very isolated, these poor underground people. And they just don't want to get any more downtrodden, destroyed, or killed. Especially when there's a room called the Room of Death that awaits anyone that doesn't listen or, doesn't adhere to the Goldini's rules. So they come across after going through this really ancient part, a really modern section. I mean, like, of course, suddenly it opens up into modernism. And there's a room full of gold, and there's gold light shining everywhere. And you're like, wow, it's gold. There's counterfeiting going on, and people, like, just working hard to counterfeit. And they've all got the symbols on their back. That was the same symbols as the little clown motif that Joseph had found on the papers, and also the same symbol of the vineyard that was loading up its boxes that you saw a brief flash of in the previous saga. So you know that this has been going on for the entire time the series has been going on, and for probably much, much longer, of this huge, giant conspiracy that, yeah, is being led by the Goldini. Yes, and you find out the name of the company that is obviously shipping whatever's being counterfeited and made down there is the Allura Agricultural Company. And obviously, an agricultural company does not sound like a company that would be counterfeiting money. But alas, not only are they counterfeiting money, it turns out that the sample that Joseph sent to Lauren to investigate what is this strange powder that seems to be all over the church where the miracles are happening, turns out that the air was laced with cocaine.
Oh, come on! How picky you are for a little bit of cocaine. Oh, Zoe, you are too picky.
I know, but you know what? I don't like dust at the best of time. So dust that will also make me hallucinate. Like it irritates my nose, which I know is ironic considering how cocaine works. So, but I'm like, yeah. So that would explain why people are seeing gold Jesuses and rainbows, because the room was covered in cocaine that was escaping from this plant. That again, as we know from previous arc, like secret organizations love to smuggle cocaine about the place. And so yeah, we've come across another cocaine ring and a counterfeit ring, and we also have worked out that as the trucks leave and they sound the horn for the trucks to leave, it sends a vibration up through the floorboards that sounds like horns. I was like, that's the mysterious noise. It sounds of the trucks leaving with the cocaine. So it's like, well, no wonder not upstairs they didn't want anyone finding out this. Can you imagine you were worshipping in this church and you realise that you're high on cocaine and, you know, there's an underground smuggling ring beneath you, and it's just like, oh dear. It's not good.
Not at all.
But I felt very glad for Gaia at this moment. At first, they are caught. They're caught sneaking around. The guns of a lot of, like, decapitating clowns are all on them. But the head decapitating clown of his scythe is like, ha! It was me, Julia, all along! I'm so beautiful, and you are in the wrong place, boys. Ha! He's not quite so ha. He's more like, flutter, beautiful. Oh, I've got you now, beautiful, eyelids flutter.
Yes, that's more his style. I suggest they should stop calling him Father Julia, because it's pretty clear he was never a priest.
Yeah.
So let's just call him Julia. Because really...
He's not a father.
Not at all.
No,
not
he's
at
just...
all. But he's so beautiful. And he sits on his throne made of gold, in the golden room, of course. And he's dressed in gold because the man is so humble.
Yes.
And he speaks to them like a king would speak to his audience. And he offers them a beautiful way out and a way to avoid the chamber of death. And of course, it's like listening to Lucifer offering them to sell their souls in exchange of everything beautiful and magnificent in the world. And what really hits you is that he believes in what he says.
Yep.
I mean, he was so brainwashed, because we learn he was born into this cult or secret society, that he really believes in what he says. Why not?
Yeah. And he's definitely grown up into the crazy cult leader that believes that he's the second coming. But it's definitely like, it's very Lucifer analogy. I mean, he's got the face of an angel, absolutely the most beautiful man you've seen, and also has the ability to get your, like, desires and your wishes fulfilled. So he's definitely our Lucifer of the series. but he is damn pretty. And yes, he takes Roberto and Joseph to the gold room, and poor Bill and Bougie have been sent to the room of death. And he's basically, he knows what these boys want, and he's like, I think you should join the Goldini. And they're like, why would we join you? Why would we join your weird, very non-religious cult? And he's like, no, 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 we are far closer to God because we have all the riches and the wealth. And I'm like, don't think that's how God works. Like, having more money and gold doesn't make you closer to heaven. I was like, but Roberto, like, you are so clever. And the platitudes of, like, you're so intelligent and you are wasted in the church. And it was so brave of you to come out and admit on live television that you are the son of a killer. But unfortunately, like, now that that's public knowledge, you know that the church, the Vatican, is never going to support you in any of your endeavors. You can never get a promotion. Any like dreams of becoming like a bishop or an archbishop are out the way because they're not going to promote somebody who's got like murderer's blood inside them. And therefore you're never going to be able to get hold of the books and the ancient texts that you love so much and the rare books, because without those promotions you don't have access to all of it. And if you stayed with me and you worked for the Goldini, then you could have access to all the world's knowledge and rare books, everything. You could spend your life researching your life's purpose, surrounded by everything you could possibly want. And he's like, yeah, talk a good talk. And then he goes, and you, Joseph, I heard about poor Ryota's condition. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear about it. But we have the best medicine, the best science at our fingertips. We could do everything in our power. We could cure him. We could make sure he has a good life. He could live a long time. Your heart's desires will be met, and your brother will live and be well. And isn't that amazing? I can give you everything. And also, Joseph is just like, no, you are not all powerful or giving. I believe in Roberto. Roberto's a bit like, what? It's like, when there is a man as good and strong as Roberto around, then why would I ever be tempted by you? And you're just like, I love the fact that even Roberto looks a bit like, you put a lot of faith in me. But yeah.
And in that moment, I wondered, did you just task him with finding a cure for cancer? Because really, it sounded like that. I have faith in Roberto. You can offer me whatever you want, but I have faith in this man. He will do the same without asking for my soul in exchange. So did you just ask him to cure Ryota and basically find a cure for cancer?
It's like, it's a lot of pressure on Roberto. But then he does at least clarify that goes, Ryota is my brother and it's my responsibility to find a cure for him. And so I think that calms Roberto down, going, oh, phew. No, I'm supporting him in all of his endeavours, but he's the one that actually wants to find the cure for Ryota. Thank goodness. So of course, like, Roberto is like, well, of course I'm going to say no. Like, it's not worth selling my soul to, get all these things. I'm happy with, like, what I have. And Julia is like, oh dear then. Well, I suppose it's off to the room of death with you. And he sends them away to what looks like a nice, empty, large room with some weird pillars that look like demons. Very subtle.
But he tried, at least.
Yeah.
He gave them a choice. He tried to save their lives.
Yeah.
Because Julia really cares.
He does.
For what, we don't know, but he really cares.
Yeah, and he seems very keen on having those guys around. He's like, I want to keep them. Those priests, they're going in my harem. Basically. He's like, I like the look of those priests. I'm keeping them. But we find out the room of death, as Roberto explains it, is just a glorified water torture chamber because the statues open their mouths and in pours water, and they are going to drown. And it's like, oh dear, this again is not very good. But luckily, they find out that, well, we also know that Amy's baby is alive and well. And being raised in the cult somewhere. So I'm like, oh goodness, there's probably being like raised as the next like leader of the cult, because they'll need someone to take Julia's place at some point, and it's going to be Amy's baby. But at least we're like, oh, there's hope that the baby might be like okay. But alas, they're not very okay with the drowning in the room. And then Roberto remembers the story, and we go back to Venus and the moon aligning, and the true sign of the beast. And we're like, wait a minute, we've now found out it's now some demonology around a demon called Atar. And I'm like, who are you, Atar? I don't know who you are. I've not heard of Atar. But basically, they have worked out that one of the statues will have the true path on it, and they just have to count the real number of the beasts on it. And they're like, that seems simple. Good thing we've got Roberto of them. Bougie does one of the most useful things by going, it's over here. It's like, well done, you found the right statue. And Roberto, the water's slightly coming up, dives under, looks out, and he goes, haha, I have found the mechanism. It's written in Greek. And they're like, numbers? No letters. And they're like, well, that's really helpful. It's like, are you forgetting who Roberto is? He could probably speak Greek backwards. And he's like, I just need to cipher it. Just give me a minute to like, oh yes, and when Moon and the Venus align, and there's this demon, and spelt backwards, and in Greek, and upside down, and complicated wiggly stuff. And he's like, aha, I think I've got it. So he dives back down to start pressing the buttons, and he starts counting and pressing them. But the water's really filling up now, and Roberto is desperately trying to hold his breath and finish it off. And you're like, oh my god, Roberto's going to drown. Currently, like, Bougie is calling for his mum and just being absolutely like, I'm going to die. Go faster. Bill is holding up Joseph, but we realise that Roberto is about to drown. So Bill kind of has to obviously let go of Joseph to go down and help keep Roberto steady so he can finish off the puzzle. But just does mean that Ryota now is drowning. And it's just like, it's one of those things. It's like, oh, Joseph, could you not have just held on to the thing that, like, Bougie was holding on to? But then we realise that that Joseph is a little less strong than Roberto, less physically like able, and he's just like, oh no, I seem to be drowning. It's like, dude, your boyfriend's like nearly killing himself to press the buttons and is drowning way worse than you, but that's all right. Joseph passes out and doesn't remember the rest of the escape in the slightest. It turns out Roberto has definitely solved the mystery of the puzzle, got the right code, a secret tunnel like opened up, and even though he nearly drowned, Roberto is the one that carries Joseph out, and it's like, oh my goodness, Joseph was underwater for like 2 seconds, you were underwater for like 10 minutes. Like, but you know, you carry out your boy. And they realise that this must have been how the boy from the caves escaped, and they found the secret tunnel, and this will explain where he came from. And they also start putting together the rest of like the mystery of what's going on around here. So that night, Trones found out that like the boy had been killed by the decapitating clown. It obviously flashed him back to 30 years ago, where he and Teresa tried to get away with like obviously a murder and deception of Carlos so they can have their relationship, so where they dressed up as the decapitating clown. And so now we know that it was Teresa dressed as the clown, and it was Antonio holding the camera, Antonio holding the camera, and that Antonio had given the drugs to Dominica, so she was just wild and out of it. They'd killed Carlos, got him out of the way, and they'd moved on with their life. But Turnes had always thought that Teresa being hit by lightning was his divine punishment. So seeing the clown again just sent him into a whirlwind of crazy, and he decided to run away. And in his running away, he stowed aboard a small plane, and the plane was flying away, and he was like, yay, I'm escaping. But there was technical difficulties on the plane, so it had to drop its landing gear, and obviously Thrones was somehow holding onto the wheels of the plane, so he froze to death and fell down and landed in a cowshed. And you're like, what a way to go. But he did conspire to kill someone. A not very nice person, but he still did conspire to like kill someone. So that's why he ran away and disappeared. Obviously he was painting the statue to kind of like make the weird miracles seem more real but also more fake. And I don't really think he knew actually about the weird cocaine smuggling gold mines of doom underneath his church. It just so happened that his true crimes were exposed as those are exposed. But yes, we cut to 1 week later, and Joseph has been like recovering after not really remembered anything about the secret, like getting out of the church. And he finds out that obviously like the cocaine was what made everyone go a bit doolally in the church, and it's not really a miracle. And he also talks to Lauren, and Lauren's again like, so again, not a miracle. Bye! So curt is Lauren. Is like, cool, bye. And they're left with still a few kind of like But it turns out that once again, Julia has disappeared and is nowhere to be seen. And they're like, oh dear, he has escaped once again and is now off in the wild somewhere. Luckily, they've reported this gold mine, slavery, counterfeiting things. The police have at least gone in and arrested everybody and sealed out and freed the poor people living underground. So it is a win. But Roberto and Joseph are still a little bit worried that Julia managed to escape and is out there somewhere. And we get a lovely discussion at the end about the nature of greed and the fact that basically Julia's religion is the much greed as possible is amazing, and that will bring him closer to God and control people, and he might as well be a god because of all the gold and power he has, and it's basically the absolute power corrupts absolutely, and if you get so obsessed with materialistic things, you actually move further away. But his ego is so inflated that he actually believes his story, and he believes that his power and righteousness is all powerful. Oh. And then our last scene is a mysterious phone call, and Joseph going, Ryota! And we see Ryota being taken away with a mask on his face, and it's like, oh no, his condition has worsened, and the episode ends. No.
But was it a natural thing that happened to Ryota? Or did Julia do something to Ryota to get back to Joseph for saying no to his offer?
Yes. Because Roberto seems to think that there is a connection. Because Joseph still wanted to see the good in Julia. It's like, but all that work you did with those patients, why did I thought you really cared for them? And he was like, no, it was just furthering our human experimentation. And what human experimentation? He's like, yeah, we were trying to control people. And we wanted to research mind control and brainwashing. And it's like, oh my God, we're going to add that to the list of crazy. But...
And we shouldn't forget that in the opening credits, there is a scene with Ryota surrounded by covered people in capes. So...
yeah. There's obviously there's a bigger conspiracy going on still, and Ryota might have just fallen victim of it. Oh no.
Probably. Oh yeah. But don't worry. I'm pretty sure Roberto will help Joseph saving Ryota.
Yeah.
Or perhaps Ryota is lost to Julia and we will never see him again. We don't know.
No. Well, I mean, I do, because I've seen it before. But for the state of this...
I don't know. Okay. Well, I don't know, okay?
Yeah.
So...
It has been a while since I've watched it, so I'm a bit shaky on the details. So, but I knew some of it, and some of it I'd totally forgotten. I remember there being people living underground, but I couldn't remember why. And I knew that Julia wasn't dead. As it turns out, it was his failure of a brother, as he described him. And you are all round just not a nice dude, are you? You are so beautiful, but every inch of your insides are rotten.
Oh, yes. You are as beautiful as you are rotten, my dear.
Yep, most definitely. But no. Any more to add to this episode, Miss Gaia?
No.
No? Well, then from me, I'm saying bye for now. Obviously, if you like demonic possession and horror movies, check out our Beneath Your Skin podcast. And if you want to see anything else I do or any of my social media, let Zoe spoil you. We'll get you my Twitter, my YouTube, my Facebook, and my Instagram. But for now, bye.
Thank you for listening and bye-bye.